Every great empire in history believed it was different, that it was too powerful to fall, too big to fail. Rome said it, Britain said it, the Ottoman Empire said it, and right now there are economists, historians, and insiders quietly asking a question that most people are too afraid to speak out loud. Is the United States sitting at stage 5 of empire collapse? And if so, what comes next? Stay right here, because the answer to that question affects your savings, your job, your family, and your future. And you deserve to know the truth. Welcome to Financial Freedom Desk, where we cut through the political noise and give you the raw economic truth that mainstream media buries on page 10. If you want analysis that actually makes sense of the world around you, hit that subscribe button right now and tap the like button. It takes 2 seconds and it helps us reach more people who need to hear this. Now, let's get into it, because this one is going to make you think differently about everything. Now, before anyone jumps to conclusions, let's be clear about what we're actually discussing here. This is not a political statement. This is not left versus right, Democrat versus Republican. This is economic history, cold, hard, and consistent. Empires don't collapse because of one bad president or one bad policy. They collapse because of systemic patterns that build over decades, sometimes centuries, until the weight of it all becomes too much to carry. And those patterns, they've been studied and documented. In fact, historian and economist Sir John Glob, who spent decades analyzing the rise and fall of empires, identified a repeating 6-stage cycle that every major empire in history has, followed without exception from the Assyrian Empire to Rome, from the Arab Caliphate to the British Empire. Each one moved through the same stages before its eventual decline. The first characteristic is an obsession with money and wealth over productivity. In stage 5 empires, the economy shifts from making things to financializing things. Instead of building factories and producing goods, the focus moves to financial instruments, derivatives, speculation, asset inflation. The United States today has the largest financial sector in world history. Wall Street generates trillions, while American manufacturing as a share of GDP has fallen dramatically over the past 5 decades. In 1960, manufacturing made up nearly 25% of the U.S. economy. Today, it sits below 11%. The empire stopped building and started borrowing. The second characteristic is an unsustainable debt burden. Here's a number I want you to remember: $34 trillion. That is the current national debt of the United States. That's not a typo. 34 trillion, and it's climbing by roughly $1 trillion every 100 days. When Glob studied past empires, he found that stage 5 was always marked by governments spending far beyond their means, borrowing from the future to pay for the present. Does that sound familiar? The interest payments alone on that debt are now exceeding $1 trillion annually. Think about what that means. The United States is now spending more money paying interest on its debt than it spends on national defense, more than education, more than infrastructure. The empire is paying for its past instead of investing in its future. The third characteristic Glob identified is the rise of celebrity culture over civic virtue. In the great empires of the past, stage 5 always brought with it an obsession with entertainers, athletes, and public figures, while serious thinkers, statesmen, and builders became less valued. He wrote about this in the 1970s, decades before social media existed. The fourth characteristic is political division that paralyzes action. Every stage 5 empire became so divided internally that it could no longer make the difficult decisions needed to course correct. Rome in its final century couldn't agree on basic governance. The Ottoman Empire fractured into factions. The British Empire faced massive internal disagreements as it declined. America today is experiencing a level of political polarization that polls and historians alike describe as the worst since the Civil War, and that division has consequences. It means the hard economic reforms that are desperately needed are politically impossible to pass. The fifth characteristic, and perhaps the most chilling one, is the debasement of currency. Every empire in stage 5 began diluting its own money. Rome literally melted down silver coins and replaced them with cheaper metals. Britain slowly abandoned the gold standard. In the United States, since the Federal Reserve began its aggressive monetary expansion, particularly post-World War II and again post-World War II, the money supply has exploded. The dollar has lost more than 96% of its purchasing power since the Federal Reserve was created in 1913. That is textbook stage 5 currency debasement. happening in slow motion over a century. Now, here's where I want to be balanced, because good economic analysis requires us to look at all sides. There are serious economists and historians who argue that comparing America to ancient empires is a flawed exercise. They point out that the United States still has the world's reserve currency. The dollar is still king of global trade. They point out that America still leads the world in innovation, in technology, in military capability. Silicon Valley still produces more breakthrough companies than anywhere else on Earth. American universities still dominate global rankings, and they make a fair point. The United States has an extraordinary capacity for reinvention. Let's move from history to data, because numbers don't have political opinions. The U.S. debt to GDP ratio is now past 120%. Economists widely agree that above 90%, debt begins to significantly drag on economic growth. America crossed that threshold over a decade ago and has never looked back. Consumer debt in the United States has hit a record $17.5 trillion. That's household debt, credit cards, auto loans, student loans, mortgages. The average American family is financially stretched thin in a way that hasn't been seen since before the 2008 crash. The US dollar's share of global currency reserves has been declining steadily. In 2000, the dollar made up 71% of global reserves. Today, that number is closer to 58%, minus, and dropping. Countries like China, Russia, Brazil, India, and Saudi Arabia are actively working to conduct trade outside of the dollar system. This isn't a fringe conspiracy theory, it's documented central bank policy from multiple major economies. Meanwhile, domestic infrastructure receives a D+ grade from the American Society of Civil Engineers. Roads, bridges, water systems, electrical grids, the physical backbone of economic power, are aging and underfunded. These aren't alarmist talking points. These are published, verified data points from government agencies, the IMF, and independent economists, and together they paint a picture that demands serious attention. So does all of this mean America is finished? That collapse is inevitable and imminent? No, empires don't fall overnight. Rome took centuries to fully collapse. The British Empire declined over decades. These transitions are long, slow, and uneven. But here's what matters for you personally, right now. You don't need to wait for consensus before you protect yourself. The time to prepare is before the storm, not during it. Diversify your assets. Don't hold all your wealth in a single currency or a single country's financial system. Consider tangible assets, real estate, commodities, precious metals that retain value when currencies weaken. Invest in skills and knowledge that remain valuable regardless of economic conditions. Stay informed, not through panic and headlines, but through understanding how economic systems actually work. And most importantly, understand that empires don't collapse because of external enemies. They collapse from within. The greatest threat to American economic power isn't China or Russia. So it's the decisions being made right now about debt, spending, currency, and civic responsibility. History gave us the roadmap. The only question is whether we choose to read it. Every empire believed it was different. Every empire believed it had escaped the cycle. And every empire eventually discovered that economic gravity is not negotiable. Is the United States at stage 5 of empire collapse? The evidence is serious enough to demand that we ask the question with honesty and urgency, not with panic, but with clear eyes and a willingness to act. This is Financial Freedom Desk. And our job is to give you the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, because knowledge is the only real protection in an uncertain world. If this video gave you something to think about, do something right now. Share it. Send it to someone you care about. Post it in your group chat, because these are conversations that need to happen in living rooms, at dinner tables, everywhere. And drop a comment below with your honest take. Do you think America is in stage 5? Or do you believe in the comeback story? I want to read every single perspective. Let's have a real conversation. Subscribe to Financial Freedom Desk for more analysis that mainstream media doesn't want you to see. Stay informed, stay prepared, stay free.